Big Money with Alicia Miller here. Big Money in Franchising. Today we're talking about what I call the gateway drug to entrepreneurship, which is franchising. This is an area where you can become an entrepreneur, become very successful, and not necessarily have all the knowledge you need to get a business up and running because a lot of the systems, a lot of the scale have been already set up for you. And it's really about following a model. And I've always been a big proponent of franchising. You're listening to Start, Scale, Exit, Repeat Serial Entrepreneur Secrets Revealed. And today's show is all about big money and franchising and the whole state of the franchise market and what you can do as an entrepreneur to really participate in that franchising as well. And to become part of, to learn how to become an entrepreneur in a
Hear me?
very complicated world.
Okay.
Michelle, you're there?
I am here now. I'm getting a bad connection. I'm going to move because I can't hear you
Yeah.
guys.
All right. We've got our co-host Michelle Van Tilburg here is on stage. She'll be joining us. We'll be getting started in a minute here. And if you don't know, this is a Clubhouse. We do a live show every Friday, 2 o'clock Eastern, and we interview authors, experts, entrepreneurs, billionaires, many different people who are in this particular startup ecosystem, the space. And we really try to crack the code of what it takes to succeed at entrepreneurship. And unlike other podcasts, unlike other shows, we're actually a live show. And you can come on stage, you can ask questions, and you can connect with us and also the authors, the experts. You can share your experience on stage. We're here to help you in the community to become successful because entrepreneurship is a trade like any other trade, and you need to learn how to sharpen your sword. You need to learn how to become better and better at starting, scaling, exiting, repeating. Now, I know that's the title of our podcast, Start, Scale, Exit, Repeat, Serial Entrepreneur Secrets Revealed. That's also the title of the number one best-selling book, which came out last year and now has 29 global awards. Very proudly can say that we just won another one, another big award last week. It was for one of the top business entrepreneurship books with the Nautilus Book Awards. And that particular award is open to all books globally. And we were able to place a silver medal on that award as well. And that followed last month's award with Axiom, where we won gold, top book on entrepreneurship in the United States, I guess globally, for entrepreneurship. And that's one that we won last month as well. So this book has really been breaking a lot of records. If you haven't already got your copy, you need to get a copy. You need to understand it. But this podcast is trying to do what we do in the book, which is decode the mystery of how to create wealth. And by starting, scaling, exit, repeating. And one of the steps to, I call it the gateway drug of entrepreneurship, is franchising. So we're going to be talking with Alicia Miller today. She is also an award winner of the Axiom Book Awards. She's a fellow medal holder of the Axiom Book Awards, and that's how we reached out to her and said, "Hey, we'd love to have you on because when we learn more about this area, this is something that you can do that almost anyone can do when they're just starting out in their career, where they can get involved and actually learn a business without having to know every single thing you need to do." Don't get me wrong, I still think you need to read the book, Start, Scale, Exit, Repeat. You still need to read the book, The E Myth. You still need to read the book, Zero to One, or The $100 Startup. Those books are valuable, but being involved in a franchise, that can be a way for you to get started in the world of entrepreneurship. So we're honored to have Alicia on stage with us right now. Alicia, thank you for coming. And I know this is the first time I think you're on Clubhouse, but we really appreciate you coming on and sharing your expertise about franchising.
I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So we're gonna kick it right off. I don't know where my co-host is. She's just bouncing around there. She's somehow I think she's having
She was
internet
having an
problems.
audio issue. She was having an audio issue. She's going to rejoin in 1 minute.
That's okay. We got you, Mimi. You're welcome to ask questions too. Mimi's our editor in chief here at Startup Club, and she does a lot of the articles. She's the one who manages the website. It's phenomenal. We're getting a lot of great traffic and a lot of great exposure by Google. Every article we write now is on the front page of Google for the terms. But let me hit it right off out of the gate, Alicia. You're franchising. I called it a gateway drug to entrepreneurship. Why do you think it's important for entrepreneurs or young people to think about getting into a franchise versus just starting their own idea themselves? I know it's a bit of a controversial topic to kick it off, but why does franchising give you an advantage?
So I'll just go through my thought process when I first got into franchising as a multi-unit entrepreneur. I didn't want to start something from scratch. I knew myself well enough to know that I did not have some burning invention or burning need to start something from scratch. I didn't have a brilliant idea to start a business. I just wanted to run my own business. And so that profile is franchising through and through, because you can go find a franchise system that fits your requirements as an investment, as a business you want to run, but you don't have to start it from scratch. You're using somebody else's playbook. And I even took it one step further because I entered via a resale. I did not start a brand new unit from scratch because there is risk associated with that. Most all of the franchise industry is geared towards selling people new franchises and starting from scratch. And I just felt like that wasn't the right path for me because I wanted to build something bigger and flip it, sell it within 5 years. That was my timeline for personal reasons. That's what I wanted to do. That's hard to do, starting a unit from scratch, building up the business, and getting it big enough so you can sell it. I just felt a resale was a better path for me.
Yeah, and I think you just hit it right there is about risk, right? This concept of when you start out and you come up with your own idea and it's good, but you just don't have the systems in place. You don't have the even getting financing for franchises can be a lot easier than a brand new business with just an idea.
Very true.
Um, yeah, if is it really what is the success rate? Let me go to that question. I know the success rate I talk about in the book, Start Scale Exit Repeat, about 18% for first time entrepreneurs. Do we have a success rate for franchises? I'm just curious if you have any stats around that.
I don't, but I have a couple comments around that. First is just because something's a franchise does not mean it's a proven system. There are plenty of businesses that are technically set up as a franchise, but they are young brands that don't have systems in place yet. That is, from my perspective, that's akin to venture investing. It may still be a fit for you, but it's not without risk because you're coming into a system that's just starting to figure it out. And technically, yes, it's a franchise for the legal definition of a franchise. They're selling you a brand you can operate under, they're giving you the rights to a territory, etc. So that makes it a franchise. That doesn't mean it's a proven system yet. To me, if you've got fewer than, say, I would say 10 or 20 units open that are franchised, then you're still very much a young business. And that has a higher potential failure rate than something that's been much more established and can say that it works in that market. Again, that's why I was so excited about a resale, because not only is it proven, but you can see the operating history of that unit. And you can go back and look at the customer list and you can say, okay, how many of these customers are coming back? What's been the trend in this business? How long have these employees been here? Are they dedicated to the business, etc.? There are 400 new brands launched in franchising every single year, according to Fran Data. Fran
Oh
Data
my gosh.
is the head honcho, big cheese, top research firm in franchising that's been doing it for decades, and they track this, and it's 400 brands a year. But we've stayed flat at around 4,000 active brands a year, give or take. So that means there's a lot of churn at the low end. So just buyer beware.
So how do you do that? Like, how does an entrepreneur figure out I should go to Subway versus a McDonald's or versus LA Fitness? How does or a CrossFit franchise? Like, how does somebody know which way to go in that universe? And you're saying even if you pick a franchise, they might not be 10, 20 stores isn't enough. They're not proven. It's not a proven model yet. So what do you do? Like, how do you figure this out?
So, first thing is you've got to sit down with yourself and your closest personal advisors and really think about what are you good at? What do you actually like to do? If you're really good, for example, at selling, there are franchises that will take advantage of that skill set, and you will be a better operator if you are very comfortable in front of people and training a team who also needs to be able to sell. That's great. If that's not your cup of tea, you either, and that's part of what the ethos of what that franchise requires to be successful, you're going to struggle. If you're in a business that requires you to, that has high labor turnover, so QSR is a great example of that. If you're effective building teams and constantly interviewing and bringing people onto the team and training managers who can be really good at that, you could be effective. If that promotes an allergic reaction from you, then don't get into that kind of a business. I think too many people get enamored with a concept that resonates with them personally, but doesn't match their skills and what they're really willing to do to be successful. You need to also think about what your objective is in running this business. Is there a particular return you're trying to get? Is it a lifestyle you're going for? Are you trying to build a business where you're going to acquire a lot of units and run a quite large enterprise, or you just want to run one or two in your local market so that those one or two have to kick off enough for you to make the living that you want to make? Who's going to be running this business with you day to day? Are you running it yourself, or are you putting a team underneath you to help run this? Start there. Don't start surfing the internet looking at concepts until you really sit down and think about what kind of business do I actually want to run? How much capital do I have to invest in this thing? What am I good at? What do I want to avoid? Because once you start surfing the internet and clicking on things, you're going to end up down a rabbit hole where you're going to get people start to call you. And suddenly you're going to be on the phone with this brand and that brand. And you haven't done the hard work to think about what you're doing first. Do that first. Then you can start vetting categories that make sense for you.
So, like typical businesses, you still have to have a bit of a passion for it, right? Because you're gonna have, I don't care what kind of business you start, whether it's a franchise or not, it's gonna be a roller coaster. You're gonna go up, you're gonna go down, and there's gonna be those tough times. And if you really cannot deal with the tough times because you don't love something, it's those, you have a passion for something, you'll get through it. But if you don't have a passion for it, you're done, you're finished.
Yeah, I
And
agree with that.
yeah, so I think it's not different in franchising, is it? It's if I love dogs and I do a dog boarding franchise, and that's something that I can just keep coming to work every day and enjoying and having fun doing. But if I hate it, then I'm not going to do it. Interestingly,
But
I started my career franchise with my family doing pizza franchises up in Toronto. And I remember working for these, or not working for, I guess sometimes you work for them. I don't know if you own them or not, but I know, of course, you own them, but it sometimes feels like a job. You buy yourself a job, but the rules were very strict. And when I was a young teenager, I was like always rebellious. And I'm like, why are they telling us to do this? We can do it better this way. But they wanted it done a particular way. Is that, I- am I being too particular? Obviously, I love entrepreneurship. And I find that franchises can sometimes be a little confining. Sorry if that's I know I'm being a little bit tough here on this question, but can
no,
be a little bit
you're right.
strict,
You're right.
right? And so you got to accept that along with the steadiness and risk mitigation by going through that path.
So let me go back to the passion thing first before I come back to your other comment. That one of the challenges when you're looking at a franchise opportunity is it's really easy to get emotionally involved. Don't treat this like you're picking a marriage partner because you are going to be under a very strict contract, as you mentioned, and it could be 5 or 10 years. It could have clawback clauses that mean if you want to exit, you're going to owe money even once you've exited the business. They're going to be expected to stay whole based on whatever royalties you would have generated while you're in that business. So don't make the mistake of confusing passion for, is this a business that's a viable business? Is this a team I actually want to work with? You can love dogs all day long, but if the model is bad and you can't make money, you're going to really hate that you let your love for dogs talk you into a business that's not a good fit for you or is just frankly not a viable business in the first place. So as you're doing that hard work up front to make your list of what you're trying to get out of this, keep coming back to that throughout the entire discussion process with the franchise so that you don't let passion cloud your better judgment. On the strictness of the contract, I agree. It's meant to be strict because you've got to protect the system from rogue operators. But again, you've got to think about what kind of entrepreneur are you? If you want you want to follow a system, but you're a little bit more of a maverick personality, you might be perfectly fine joining an emerging brand as long as you go in with eyes open that they don't have everything figured out yet. You might actually like helping them figure it out. That might be something that interests you. If it's going to grate on you that they tell you how many hours you need to be open and every little napkin and every supplier and every tiny little thing in the business, then joining a brand that's been around for 15 years might not be a fit for you because they're going to tell you what to do on all that stuff. So you got to figure out like where is this brand in its own life cycle and what's the fit for my own personality. Typically, people who come in early don't always end up staying once it's sold to private equity or once it gets to a certain scale because they miss the old days, and that's okay. But over time, brands evolve and they mature, and that's a necessary part of a good franchise system that's trying to build sustainability for the long term.
Yeah, and you're listening to Alicia Miller, who wrote the book Big Money in Franchising, an award-winning book. You can get it on Amazon there. And you also talk about in the book about private equity and how that's making a bit of a difference in the world of franchising. So in our world, we talk about start, scale, exit, and it's interesting that you're talking about how private equities now become more interested in buying these franchises. Can you talk a little bit about the path going from starting your franchise, maybe adding 4 or 5 stores or whatever, and then eventually selling to private equity?
Sure. So about 750 brands, give or take, have already received some sort of private equity support. They came in the 1990s. The book goes into the history in exhaustive detail and talks about why they suddenly got excited about franchising. But but if you think that there are about 4,000 active brands, that means less than 20% of all brands have been backed by private equity. So there's this really long tail of brands that are too small. There are some holdouts. Jersey Mike's only recently took on private equity for the first time, and it got up to 3,000 locations before it did that. But those big holdouts are few and far between. There's not a lot of them. It's been a pretty picked over space at this point. If you're a new franchisor and you start your business and you start adding franchisees, you'll start getting phone calls, phishing phone calls from private equity firms and people who work with them when you're still a really young brand because they want to get to know you early. That doesn't mean that the chance of your buyout is automatic. It doesn't happen that way. There's just a lot of brands that are subscale that are too small for private equity. That's one of the reasons why multi-brand platforms have become such a thing in franchising. It's because that mechanism to take a brand from 0 to 100 units is the hardest slog initially in a brand's life. And it's really hard work. And having the assets of a platform behind you where you've got some shared services and some cross marketing, some efficiencies, because you don't yet have the scale efficiencies, being in a multi brand platform can help accomplish that. That's why these platforms are gobbling up these emerging brands, bringing them into the platform, and then hopefully that helps give the brand a little bit more strength and resilience to get to the next level. But it's important if you're, unfortunately, I think what we're seeing is back in the day, people would start a franchise because they had a great restaurant and customers kept bugging them. Why don't you franchise this? This is a great concept, or a maid service or painting or whatever it was. Now people are starting franchises with the expressed intent of flipping it to PE. That's really different. That's a big change in the culture of franchising. I don't know that it's necessarily a positive change, but the good news is that in order to appeal to a PE buyer, you've got to do very specific things in how you build up your franchise, most of which are beneficial to franchisees because private equity wants to come in and invest in growth and scale. And if you don't have the scaffolding in place for them to get behind, you're not interesting to them. So the more resilience you build in with your model, the more scaffolding you put in place, the more support you're giving your franchisees, the better your odds that you will attract an offer, attract interest. And oh, by the way, all those things are good for your franchisees. So it ends up being a win-win. It's not to say that things don't go sideways occasionally, but generally that PE attention has been positive for how people think about what kind of business they need to build.
And you're talking also about franchisees who like I had a friend who had all the Five Guys for Colorado, and he sold to PE. I believe it was a PE firm. You're talking about franchisees, not necessarily just the franchisors, right?
Correct. Yeah, there's a lot more activity at the franchisee level now than there ever has been from private equity. Yeah.
And is that because it's stable? It's stable income, like the predictable, stable income?
Because, yeah, when you've got a system that's already achieved scale and it's a model that you believe in and kicks off good cash flow, it's easy to model out how to grow the business and consolidate within a system to create a chunkier asset that's then worth more, right? So as long as that PE firm is comfortable working in within the strict contract of what is a franchise, so they have to kind of get their heads around that. You can consolidate a lot of units, you can professionalize management, you can put best practices in place to make sure that underperforming units get fixed. And so there's an opportunity for you to monetize that skill set, consolidate a bunch of units in a system like your friend did in Colorado, and then sell it to someone who maybe is larger and doesn't want to do that hard work of doing the acquisitions and the consolidation and just wants a nice chunky asset to run. Yeah, that's absolutely what's happening within scale systems. If it's a sub, it's by scale, it's got to be at least 100 units or more. Otherwise, there's not enough units to acquire that a PE firm can then start consolidating.
Yeah, I have a question. Just stepping back some, just thinking about what you said at the beginning of our hour here. You were mentioning there's a certain profile that are really drawn to a franchise. So, one thing I've heard, and I want to know about your thoughts on this approach, is that franchisors love people, young people that have started working in one of their stores and driven up through a store rank or whatnot to then also become franchisors. I'm curious if you think that's a good path for some of our friends that are starting out or really just really getting into that whole world.
Did you mean
Yeah,
franchisees,
that's what I meant.
Michelle?
Yes.
Yeah, that's a well-worn path. Lots of systems, especially in the restaurant business, have built themselves up that way. Or the other way is if you're an investor, they want to make sure you are paired with an operating partner who has equity in the business because they believe that operating managing partner at the unit level needs some skin in the game. The challenge is if you're starting in that business as an employee, are you then able to cobble together enough capital to then go buy your own unit? So that's a different issue. But for sure, I think it's also useful for prospective franchisees to go spend a day in the life, go see what that franchisee does every day, and go see if you can watch what those employees are doing and make sure that those are employees you feel comfortable recruiting and managing or having your managers do it. And that's the kind of work you want to get up and do every day.
Yeah, there's really a lot to think about, isn't there? Like how much support you're going to get, how much you have to pay ongoing for
Mm-hmm.
that support, how restrictive they are. I guess that's, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of factors there at play.
Some restrictions are good and some aren't.
Yeah.
Some are going to, and it depends on your personality. I don't really need somebody telling me what, supplies to buy. For example, I would be horrible as a franchisee in a system that dictated down to every napkin and fork who I had to buy things from. If I can find it cheaper somewhere else, maybe I want to do that. Some systems will allow you to do that, and some are like, nope, it's part of our brand standard that we don't have really thin napkins, right? So you got to figure out where you are on the spectrum.
Um,
And you've got to validate what support are you actually getting for your
right.
royalties and your fees.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking on the marketing side. Are they doing the marketing and you're giving them the money? Like, I'm imagining it's a blend. I don't know.
It depends on the franchise, but you've got to read the fine print, right? So if there's a national brand fund where they're taking a little bit of money from everybody and they're pooling it together to do group buying of, say, search terms. That's good because now you're not fighting against each other for the search terms. So it's certainly more cost effective that way. The however is in the fine print in the franchise agreement, it sometimes will say something to the effect of, there's no guarantee that the money you kick in is going to be spent in equal amount in your territory. Let that sink in for a second. If you've got to send them 5% or 3% of your top line sales every month and they're not spending that money in your market, where's it going? It's going to somebody else's market or to their overhead. So really understand who's doing, what does it take to be successful in this business? Back up for a second. What are the key performance metrics in this business? How do you drive money in the door? How do you drive customers in the door? Who is doing the work to drive customers in the door? And how are they finding out about your brand? And where's that? You got to walk all the way through the cash flow to understand where the money is coming in and where it's going out to make sure that it's a model that makes sense for you.
Yeah, I think along with, like you said, is it a good fit? So, where would you encourage people? Because I imagine there's people here in the club that are listening and they're wondering, how do I figure out? Because, like you said, you start filling out things and making inquiries and you're bombarded. So, how do we weed through there? Is there like some kind of rating or experts or whatnot on franchises and helping people match?
I would do two things. First, three things. First is find yourself a franchise attorney that represents franchisees. You don't want the guy who did your mortgage paperwork or your uncle who, did your will or whatever. You want somebody who understands franchise law and can help you think through the ramifications of the contract you're signing and that you're okay with it. Don't be cheap here. This will be a very expensive mistake later if you find out you've signed up to something that you don't like. Second, there are franchise brokers out there who for a fee will help you find a franchise and they're not making commission on the franchises they recommend. So they can help you think through, what are your skill sets? What kinds of brands do you want to look at? Anybody who comes to you directly who says, I've got a franchise I want to help you buy, most of those guys are on commission. You've got to ask them how they're compensated. If you're making a $30,000 fee from making that recommendation, it colors your recommendation. It just does. So you've got to really understand how they're compensated and how they came up with the list of brands they're recommending to you and take that with a grain of salt. And the last thing is, I would say start with sites like Franchise Business Review. FBR's recommendations are based on franchisee surveys, which to me is the place you want to start. And then you need to be willing to do the work to actually read the franchise disclosure documents. They're available for free. You can get them from the state of Wisconsin's site. Minnesota, Indiana, California is a little slower to load their FDDs, but you can get them for free. Go look at the litigation history, call franchisees, start networking with them. Before you start talking to salespeople, think about it, talk to some people, find out what's going on in that system a little bit before you go too far down the rabbit hole with a salesperson.
Yeah, absolutely. This is some good advice. I can imagine. I think what you're saying there, network some with the other franchise owners, like you can learn a lot there, I'm sure.
You can. They're going to say, don't talk to franchisees till you've gone through our process. Yes and no. Before you invest yourself in that process, you want to go to your local outlet and see if you can at least see what's going on in that outlet, see if you can talk to the franchisees. Sometimes they'll be willing to talk to you, and you don't
Right.
get it if you don't ask.
Alicia, we have Richard here on the stage. Richard, did you have any comments or questions for Alicia?
I think it's a great topic, and overall, it's just finding what's a match for you between who do you want to work with, what your passion is, and just using filters. And again, finding somebody that their motivation is not commission. So you may have to pay them, yet you'll get more of a valid answer. So I think it's a great topic. And I like the idea of starting a business, and I know it's a lot more work, but with the intention to turning it into a franchise, that could really create some big wealth there. A lot more work, but could really create some wealth. But I think it's a great topic.
There's some gotchas there too that we probably should talk about. Not every business should be franchised. And the fact that we're launching 400 a year, but not growing by 400 brands a year says that we're doing that a lot. So anybody who tells you your business is perfect to be franchised, if they're collecting a fee to help you do that, get a second opinion because there's a whole closet industry of consultants who all they do is help people start franchising. They get the paperwork pulled together, they get you registered, they help you write your first FDD, they help you do your first operating manual. If you think you've got something special that can be franchised, work with an attorney or a consultant outside of that ecosystem to get some feedback on your viability as a franchise. Don't talk to the don't take just the word for it a consultant who gets paid $100,000 to help you start franchising. The incentives are misaligned.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I didn't realize that there were people that did that. I also believe it's a really good opportunity for somebody to get into a business. And then, as you said, Richard, even if you really think you have a scalable business, it's a great way to scale. It's not something that I often think of, but I do like the idea of it.
And running your business as a franchisor is really different as an entrepreneur. You got to think about that too. Let's say you've
Yeah.
got, I don't know, a salon concept. You love running your salon, and then you build it up, you've got 10 salons corporate, and you're like, wow, this is a great model. I should franchise this. But being a franchisor is a different business. Now you're in the business of selling franchises and supporting franchisees, independent entrepreneurs. And they have opinions and they're going to expect support and they're going to want to talk to you and your team. And if they don't like what's happening, they're going to be mad. So that isn't always something that people think about when they think to start a franchise is now you're not running your salons anymore. Now you are a franchisor and it's different. And it can be great. You can build an incredible culture. You can really get excited about working with entrepreneurs and helping them realize their dreams of running a business. But it's different than what you started off with, which was running your business yourself.
Now, what would you suggest for someone who wants to be a franchisor? I'm just curious because it's popular right now to do pop up stores, things that don't require such a heavy commitment. How would you test the concept if you were doing so for like a durable consumer product to see if it's even worthy of being in a store of its own?
So I would have at least a couple of corporate stores or units. I think according to the research Frandata has done, a 60% of new franchises launch with 0 or 1 location. So not only have they not really tested it, but there's also not a lot of cash flow there, right? So remember, if you're building a franchisor, you're going to be selling your licenses to franchisees, they're going to expect support. How are you going to pay for that support? If you don't have at least a couple of corporate units kicking off enough cash, then you're going to have to get that money from your 401k or something else to get this business off the ground. Most of these franchisors that stall out do not because it's a bad concept per se, but because they run out of money and they have to stop franchising because they don't have the support. They may not go out of business. They may just stop offering actively franchises for sale. So think about what is the capital requirement you're going to need to get yourself to royalty self-sufficiency. And again, if the consultant who you're paying to get you started in the franchise gives you a spreadsheet that tells you you're going to get to 100 units in 3 years and be profitable, question that because only 15% of all franchisors hit 100 units. So how is it magically that you are the
Right.
unicorn? It's a little too tidy. You got to be really willing to poke some holes in this story. And um, what if you launched your franchise in 2019 and then COVID hit? So you've got to have enough of a backup pool of funds to get this thing moving and get yourself to at least 30 units ish. 30 to 50 units is a place where royalty self-sufficiency starts to kick in. Think about that. You're going to have to you have to open 50 franchise locations before the franchisor is profitable.
Wow, a lot. Hey, we have a
Yes.
question from the audience. Austin Rising is asking franchise versus licensing for territory based. He has in digital services. So, what are the differences? Your thoughts on licensing? I think you're saying Austin versus franchising.
That's where you need an attorney to help you identify whether or not the business you're being offered is really a license or really a franchise. Unfortunately, there are people who offer what they think are licenses, but really they're offering a franchise. So get an attorney's help to evaluate what really that is, what you're looking at.
What are the differences, though? Are there core differences in those two models? Or are they pretty much the same?
They're different, and the rule of what you're allowed to do and what you have to disclose or not disclose when you're offering a franchise is different. So that's where you need an attorney to help you walk through what is it you're actually getting.
And what you have to give. Heard
Yeah.
some very strenuous situations in some of these franchises. Okay. Austin, I hope that covered it. I see you said thumbs up. But anyone who wants to come to the stage, come up here. I think this is a unique opportunity to hear Alicia speak about franchises. I know that I'm learning, and obviously you're an expert in this, Alicia. So we do have somebody who's come up on the stage. Bam. Bam. What is your question or comments?
Thank you so much. First of all, my comment, Alicia, you are very adept at franchising, so kudos to you. Are you familiar with the Franchise Act? I'll ask my question regarding the Franchise Act. At what dollar amount for cost to participate in the franchise does the Franchise Act kick in?
So the Franchise Act, people will say franchising is very regulated. You will hear franchise salespeople say that. The reality is that the Federal Trade Commission has only brought one or two judgments against bad behavior in franchising in the last 10 years. You need to really be careful and not assume that there's any real government oversight that's going to save you if you make a bad decision. The franchising regulations at the state level can be much more likely to be enforced, and each state is different. So the state you're operating in, you need to, again, this is where a franchise attorney can help you understand the rules are different in every state, and also where you're located versus where the franchisor is located is another wrinkle. I think the bottom line is, do not assume that if something goes wrong, you have a clean and easy path via litigation to resolve the issue, because depending on the agreement, you may be forced into mediation, which doesn't necessarily also appear in the FDD. It may not be disclosed. So you may not know that a franchisor had a bunch of mediation or arbitration actions going on because that's what their franchise agreement requires, and it's not, then therefore it's not disclosed. Get some help when you're looking at a franchise system to make sure that you understand the contract that you are signing.
Do you do consulting and there's no data in your bio to connect directly with you? I'm done speaking.
I do some consulting of individual prospective franchisees, but it's not really what I do. But there are, if you want to connect via Colin and Mimi, get us connected. I'll send you some brokers who are, as I said, they're not based on commission. They're just, you pay for their time and they help you sort through this. Happy to do that. I
Excellent.
think
Well,
one,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I would say one challenge you have when you're doing this is it can feel very overwhelming. And I appreciate that. I really do. There's a lot to read through. The FDDs are 300 pages long. It's ridiculous. But that's where they get you, is if you're not willing to do the work to dig in and really read the thing and understand what's in there, you shouldn't be going into business, frankly. And because every day you're going to be putting your effort into this and your family's well-being and your financial future in this business. And franchising has grown over a century to be a fantastic source of entrepreneurial energy and is a massive contributor to our economy. But not all franchises are the same, are made the same. So you've got to really be willing to do the work and assess whether this particular franchise is the right one for you. There are more than 300 categories of franchises. There's something for everybody and for every possible investment level. So do the work up front to really pick carefully, and then you'll be so happy in the end that you invested in yourself to do that.
Just a couple other quick things. Colin, I just noticed that you are a founder of the Dot Club TLD. I'm an investor in the Dot Eco TLD. And there's some interesting synergy in this room, and I really appreciate you. And I did trade in my pink ticket. So, Colin, I will be reaching out. There's some conversations that we should have just based on our journeys. I'm done speaking. Thank you.
Awesome. Back to you, Alicia. You said you're really not a brand consultant. I'd like to know more about what you do. If you could maybe tell us what your current businesses are.
Sure. I wear two main hats. My Emergent Growth Advisors consulting practice is mostly working with emerging franchisors to help them reach sustainability, essentially. So they can, if they want to attract a private equity buyer, great, I can help them do that. But ideally, if they do all the right work, they shouldn't need one because they put themselves on the path to royalty self-sufficiency and they can build a brand that's going to make it in the long term. So that's on the emergent side. I also work with private equity firms and family offices who are investing in the franchise sector to help them, especially the newer entrants, help them understand what this thing is called franchising and what a good business to acquire might be. I also work closely with Fran Data, and as I said, Fran Data is the premier research firm in franchising, and that work is fascinating because I get to see a lot of data about what the trends are in franchising and which systems are growing and why. So that work is fascinating, and that's mostly my work over there is with larger brands who are thinking about their growth strategy and with, again, private equity firms who are doing due diligence on a franchise system. And look, PE wants to back a great brand that's sustainable, has momentum, great management team, where franchisees are having good outcomes. That's what they want. So if you build that, the buyer interest will be there.
Do you see any brands that were started, just say purely online, moving over to be a franchisor? Like, what is that kind of, I don't know, maybe some examples of that? I'd be very curious to know.
I can't think of an
Yeah,
example
I
that fits
can't
that
either.
scenario off the top of my
I
head.
can think of ones that were brands online, like a Warby Parker, but I believe all their stores are, I guess, corporate owned, which is different. It's very
Yeah,
different.
yep, that's different.
Okay. You mentioned that you do a lot of looking at trends. Is there anything that you could just tell us that you've been seeing recently? I think this club would be interested in knowing that.
Sure. I think one interesting trend we've seen over on the Fran Data side, let's do a couple things. One is it used to be that franchisees came in and wanted to stay for a decade or more, right? A lot of license agreements are actually 10 years plus. So a trend we're seeing is that more franchisees are aware of the exit and are really trying to build something that they can exit faster. I'm not sure what is behind that trend. My suspicion is it's partly because people are a little nervous about signing up to a 10-year anything. So that's a long time. That they want to be sure that they can achieve a good exit within 5 or 7 years. But that requires some changes on the franchisor side as well, right? You want franchisees who are passionate about the business and are really committed to doing well and to putting in the work that needs to be done to run a good business. But if there's going to be turnover in your system that's more frequent than what you're used to, that's something that has to be managed at the franchisor level and something to pay attention to. We continue to see this incredible number of new brands launching. It's astonishing that we're launching 400 new brands a year. But the who is launching has changed. More and more of these brands that are new are actually being launched from within existing platforms. The risk profile of that brand is really different than somebody who's starting a franchise for the first time and has never done this before. Once you've got a platform and you've got back office support and services, you can then start your own mosquito franchise and you can start your painting franchise and so on in a pretty straightforward way. Or you could pick up a small corporate model and turn it into a franchise, right? You've got the resources to do that. I think that's a great development because that means that some of these emerging brands are punch above their weight. And the prospects of those emerging brands, I think, are better in the long run because they're starting with more resources and greater expertise. So I love that trend is happening.
What would be an example of one of those that we might know?
I always am reluctant to mention specific brands because it ends up being a shortcut and people don't do their own due diligence. They go, oh, let me look up that brand. And 2 minutes later, they're on the internet and they're talking to a salesperson. So I don't mention brands. But there are quite large multi-brand platforms. If
Mhm.
you decide you are interested in the home services sector, for example, it would be difficult with a Google search to identify the top 5 or 10 multi-brand home services platforms. And then you can see, just go on their site and you can see the brands they have, and some of them are newer. Very often now they're going out and acquiring existing corporate models that are proven, and then they know the franchising side, so they can help with that. So that could potentially be a great marriage.
All right. We're coming to the top of the hour. Colin actually had to step away, but do we have any other questions in the audience? You can put it in chat or you can raise your hand and we'd be happy to bring you on stage as well as anybody already on stage. Any questions?
I'll do question part two for Alicia because of some of the work that we're doing. Alicia, what is your opinion of the franchise model versus the network marketing model?
I have been in both. I love the franchise model. I think it's closer to real business ownership. Network marketing, you don't really own anything. All you own is your sales downline. And even that you don't really own, right? It can be taken away from you. And all that happens is your downline goes to the whoever's above you in the network marketing. But that said, there's been plenty of network marketing firms that have done really well and people are happy with that. You just have to know that's really different than a franchise unit. If you get into a dispute with your franchisor as a franchisee, you have certain rights. You can take those rights to court and you can enforce the contract that you've signed up for. Your contract in a network marketing business is very different. So just be sure what you're signing up for.
Good stuff. You are truly a jewel. And I sent my email, by the way, and I am done. Thank you so much, Pam.
You're welcome. No one's asked this question, so I'll offer it as something to think about. I get asked this question a lot. Should I prioritize a franchise system that's private equity backed? Or should I avoid a system that's private equity backed? The answer is, unfortunately, it depends. It is a factor that every prospective franchisee should now think about, is where this has landed. Private equity is a factor in franchising. They love the model. They're not going anywhere. They love franchising. In most cases, private equity ownership tends to move the brand forward because their entire mandate is around growth. They want to grow the brand and eventually sell it to somebody else. All of the things they invest in to help promote growth, those things tend to be better for franchisees. Not always, but they tend to help franchisees because you can't grow unless franchisees are excited about the model and want to keep adding units. So it's one thing feeds the other. The problem is there can also be mistakes. There can be short-term profit taking. There can be short-term thinking because they're trying to flip the brand themselves in 5 or 6 years. And so that means maybe they're not investing for the long term as much as they should be. Maybe they're not involving franchisees as much in decisions as they should. If the brand is already private equity backed, it is very likely to stay private equity backed, but it could trade while you own it. So just know that can happen. The team you start with may not be the team you end with 8 years from now. If it's not currently private equity backed, if it's any good at all, its founders are getting phone calls, and at some point it may trade. So just know that's part of the potential journey. And if changes start to happen in a system, whoever owns it, and it's no longer a fit for you, this is good advice for any entrepreneur. Your business needs to be maintained in sort of a sale ready state at all times because life happens and sometimes it's just not a fit for you anymore. And you got to be able to sell the thing and move on. So if you're not always having a little bit of an eye toward the exit, you're probably doing yourself a disservice as an entrepreneur. It's got to be ready to sell.
Yeah, that was good. I'm glad that you offered up that a bit of advice and question that you hear from other folks. I think this has been an amazing session. Alicia, you're an amazing resource. We really appreciate you taking your time to come on the show today. And we also congratulate you on your award. That was
Oh,
awesome.
thank you.
Mimi and I are on the team behind the scenes with Colin. We know how much work it is. So
No, it's a lot.
congratulations on that.
Yeah. Yeah, no, really appreciate you coming on and sharing with us.
Anytime. I hope it was helpful.
And Alicia, where can we keep up with you and find your book? And if anybody's listening to this and wanted to learn more of your expertise, how can we follow up?
The book's on Amazon, Big Money and Franchising. My website is emergentgrowthadvisors.com or connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm happy to connect there as well.
Perfect. Thank you. Great conversation.
Yeah, thank
Appreciate
you
the
very much.
support.
All right, Colin, I'll go ahead and close out the room then, if that's it. Have a great weekend, everybody. Thank you so much for joining. Thank you, Alicia, and everybody for coming on stage and asking questions.
Thank you.
Yeah, sorry about that. I just got lost in the app. But anyway, thank you.